Okay, so we're going to look at question 2 on paper 2 now. And so the key thing to remember here is that the skill you're being tested on is inference. So finding information, but then making some inferences on that information. Really explain to the examiner what you understand about the text. So here you see you have to look at both texts, source A and source B. Both sources describe the similar ways in which drivers behave. Use details from both sources to write a summary of what you understand about the similar behaviour of the drivers. So always highlight the key parts of the question so that you focus on the right thing. So we know we have to look at both of the sources. They describe the similar ways the drivers behave. Use the details of both sources, summarise, and it's similar behaviour that we want to be looking at, rather than different. Okay, so I say to all my students, this question really is, you make your point, you put in your quote, and then you make an inference. It's not about language techniques, it's not about structure. We just have to say what we understand from both sources about the way the drivers behave and what we infer from that. What can we read into that? What between the lines? What is not said about them? So we've already looked at lines 1 to 10 for question 1. And so it's worth looking at that again, just to see, it to save us doing any more reading. Is there some evidence in there that will help us answer this question? So if we look, how do the drivers behave? So you can scan it now because you've already read it once. What does it say? Deliberate actions of other road users. So any other road users could be classed as the drivers. It says usually someone in a motor vehicle. So they'd make deliberate actions. My last incident happened just under a week ago when a driver decided to overtake my bike very closely. So that's behaviour, and at speed on a narrow residential street near my home in southeast London. I was unharmed, but the driver was gambling on the assumption I would not swerve. So the driver's gambling. Inevitably, the congested traffic meant I caught up with the driver. He's relatively minor, blah, blah, blah. Meant that he got home safely. Okay, so it's only worth 8 marks, so we only need 2 quotes from each text, really, to make our point. So we could start with source A straight away. Okay, so we will start with, in source A, the drivers behave. And so straight away we can infer something. And so from the fact that they do things deliberately and ride closely and quickly and they gamble, we can assume that they behave in a dangerous way. And then we're going to put in a quote that will back that up. Overtake my bike very closely and at speed. There's our quote. So here's the key bit where you're going to get some marks. If you just wrote that, you'd get a couple of marks, but there's no way you're going to get a grade 4 unless you make some inferences. From this, I can infer that they don't care about the cyclist's safety. And furthermore, they do it at speed, which suggests they have no regard for the rules of the road. Okay, so source A, we've already got a good quote and we've said 2 things about what it could infer from that quote. In terms of time and strategy, I would go to source B, and have a look now and see how the drivers behave in that. And we're just going to again read the beginning of it to see if there's anything that we can immediately use to answer this question and to make that comparison that we've got to do. So this is a different source, both about cyclists, but because it's an older text, they refer to hansom cabs, and that's horse-driven carts. So they are the drivers in this. Again, that could be maybe a little bit confusing, but they're clearly the drivers against the cyclists. So we'll have a look at this text now. So in the extract, the Countess of Malmesbury describes her experience of riding a bicycle on the streets of London. She wrote the magazine article in 1896, at a time when city streets were full of horse-drawn vehicles. Cycling was becoming a popular means of transport for women as well as for men. So on a bicycle in the streets of London by Susan, Countess of Malmesbury. So we're just looking for evidence of how the drivers behave. So a new sport has lately been devised by the drivers of hansom cabs. It consists of chasing the lady who rides her bicycle in the streets of the metropolis. Having now been the prey of the hansom cabman for nearly a year, and having given him several exciting runs, I cannot help feeling that cycling in the streets would be nicer, to use a mild expression, if he'd try not to kill me. Okay, so straight away we get an idea about how the drivers behave. They use the idea that it's sport. It consists of chasing the lady who rides a bicycle, and having now been the prey of the hansom cabman for nearly a year. And then she tries to use a bit of humour there to talk about her experience. But again, we've already got some ideas about how the drivers behave. So we're only supposed to spend 10 minutes on this question. We've already spent 6.5. So we need to crack on and write a quote from source B as well. So we'll add that to our answer. So we're comparing. So remember your comparative connective, and we're talking about similarities. So we need to use ones that reflect that. So similarly, I can't say that word. Similarly, in source B, the drivers behave in a dangerous way. And I'm going to add in silly, because she makes it sound like a game, doesn't it? Okay, and there's my quote. Chasing the lady. This infers that the drivers feel like driving is more important, and the safety of the cyclist is not. It is just a game, and do not care for safety, for the rules. Okay, so we've said similar things, so that's good because we're talking about similarities. So just then look over your answer. In source A, the drivers behave in a dangerous way, overtake my bike very closely and at speed. From this I can infer that they don't care about the cyclist's safety, and furthermore they do it at speed, which suggests they have no regard for the rules of the road. Similarly, in source B, the drivers behave in a dangerous and silly way, chasing the lady. This infers that the drivers feel like driving is more important and the safety of the cyclist is not. It is just a game and do not care for the rules. Okay, so ideally you would have 2 quotes from each text, but if by now you're nearly up to 10 minutes and you've only got 1 from each, I would definitely move on to the higher mark questions. Just make sure you've got that quote and make your inferences for both texts and use that comparative connective, and you should get grades 4, 5 or above.